Welcome to step 5 of the 6 simple steps getting started podcasting of the Podcasting 101 series. And this is step 5, publishing. In this section, we're going to be talking about choosing a platform. We're going to talk about hosting. We're going to talk about artwork. We're going to talk about distribution. And we're going to talk about marketing. Let's dive right in. Choosing a platform. The big 3, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, are where most people are going to go to listen to podcasts. Outside of the big 3, there are numerous platforms where podcasts are consumed. Amazon, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, Stitcher, to name a few. Knowing who your audience is and where they are most likely to show up is important when deciding where your podcast lives. Another component of this is hosting. Libsyn, Anchor, Buzzsprout are the top 3 according to the data of overall market share. Considerations when choosing a host are cost, bandwidth, reliability, features, ease of use, and customer service. I personally use Anchor, which is now Spotify podcasters, as it is a one-stop shop for hosting and distribution. The ease of use is fantastic. I upload it, I make a couple of settings, boom, it gets hosted on that platform, and then it gets distributed everywhere else. And there's like 12 different platforms that it broadcasts out to. Artwork. Podcast cover art is an important part of promoting your podcast. It's the first thing that people see when they're browsing for podcasts. It is important to make a good first impression. When designing your podcast cover art, there are a few things to keep in mind. Make it visually appealing. Use high quality images. Keep it simple. Use your podcast name. Include a tagline. Use a call to action. By following these tips, you can create a podcast cover art that will help you promote your podcast and attract new listeners. You can use the same cover art for a series if you have episodic podcast and it's organized by a series of, say, 4 or 6 episodes, and then indicate the different episodes in that podcast art. I don't necessarily recommend that you use the same graphic across every episode, across every series, across every property. That might seem like a good idea in the sense that it's branding and you want the brand to be recognized. However, creating a unique piece of artwork is like creating a unique thumbnail per each video on YouTube. It's something that's unique to that. You do have overall podcast artwork for the main channel, if you will. So you're not necessarily losing out on that branding. And depending on your design, you can include maybe your logo as part of that so the branding is consistent. Distribution. Once your podcast is hosted, you can distribute it to all the major podcast platforms. There are a few different ways to do this. Use a podcast distributor. A podcast distributor is a service that will distribute your podcast to all major platforms for you. Some of the popular podcast distributors are also the hosts, like Anchor, Libsyn, Podbean, etc. Or you can submit your podcast to the platforms yourself. This is more a manual process, but it gives you more control over how your podcast is distributed. Unless you have a plethora of free time, I don't recommend that approach. Use the automated distribution and let it do its thing. Marketing. Here's some tips for marketing your podcast. Use high quality podcast cover art. Write a clear and concise podcast description. Submit your podcast to all the major platforms. Promote your podcast on social media. Guest on other podcasts. Create a website for your podcast. By following these tips, you can market your podcast to all the platforms and reach a wider audience. Now, these are quick bullet points, and we can do deep dives in each one of them. But for the sake of time and for the sake of this being a beginner 101 course, I'm going to save you the details at this point. If you have any questions or want to reach out, feel free to send me an email or a DM, and happy to dive into that further with you. Rock on. You've completed your first podcast episode. You are now on your way to creating a successful podcast. Remember, you and your podcast will continue to get better over time with each episode. I look forward to hearing the great podcasts that you create. And I encourage you, please send me links, either DM or via email, as I am very serious about listening to what you're creating and how I can best help and serve you in that space. In the next section of this course is going to be the final step 6, which is measuring your success. So we're going to take a look at analytics. We're going to take a look at the data points. We're going to take a look at audience engagement and how to continue to increase and grow for your continued success. So I look forward to serving you in this way in the next video.